Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
The time for convening has arrived. The Senate will come to order.
Mr. Clerk, will you ring the bell for the first time in 2026?
The 2026 Georgia General Assembly is in full swing. Today is Wednesday, January 14th, 2026, and this is On the Record with Atlanta News First. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by my friend and colleague and the host of On the Record with Atlanta News First, airing every Sunday morning at 11 a.m., Rick Folbaum. Rick, we just heard Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones call the Senate to order for the last time, his last time that he will perform that ceremonial duty, as well as Georgia House Speaker John Burns call his chamber to order. That happened early Monday morning, earlier this week. The legislature is in full swing, and before we get into our discussion, here are a couple of packages and reports from our own outstanding political reporter and co-host with Rick Folbaum of On the Record with Atlanta News First, Doug Reardon, on what the legislature has been up to for the past 48 hours or so.
The time for convening has arrived. The Senate will come to order.
Mr. Clerk, will you ring the bell for the first time in 2026?
And with that, the 2026 Georgia General Assembly got underway Monday. Lines wrapped around the building to get inside, and lawmakers, both Democrat and Republican, seem to have just one thing on their mind.
So affordability.
But both chambers have very different visions for bringing economic relief. The Senate wants to phase out the state's income tax over the next 6 years. The House wants to drastically cut property taxes. It could stage a fight over which is more helpful and feasible. State Senator Blake Tillery led a study committee that recommended elimination of the income tax by 2032.
This isn't a joke. It's not a gimmick. It's not $20 you find in the back pocket or in a seat cushion. This is real relief.
But Democrats worry what the lost tax revenue could mean for the state's budget down the road.
Taking into consideration the long term, not just acting to make sure that we have our best political issue for one's political career, but taking the long view on some of these issues.
In this second year of the legislature's biennial, also expect bills regulating everything from data centers and AI to safe gun storage and cell phone bans in Georgia high schools. Lawmakers may also have to consider expanding the state's medical marijuana program, something activists at the Capitol Monday say they greatly want.
Our access is limited, and it needs to be really overhauled, to be honest.
Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First. On Tuesday, lawmakers, lobbyists, and faith leaders took part in the annual Georgia Faith and Freedom Coalition Luncheon. It's essentially a policy showcase for what the faith community wants to get done in the legislative session. The lineup of all conservative lawmakers featured the Lieutenant Governor, the Attorney General, Governor Brian Kemp, and former Georgia football coach Mark Richt.
We stand for life. We stand for religious freedom. We stand for lower taxes. We stand for living in government. We stand for robust support for Israel and the Jewish people.
Mac Parnell is executive director of the coalition. 2025 was a big year for religious Georgians. Lawmakers, after years of trying, passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It offers stronger protections to religious Georgians from state and local governments by mandating laws impose, quote, the least restrictive means possible on expressions of religion.
It's an encouragement to the faith community of all faith traditions that Georgia is a welcoming state where you can live out your faith without fear of government intervention into that.
But the bill was controversial. Opponents said it could open the door to discrimination, like, for example, turning down service to the LGBTQ community based on religious beliefs. This year, the faith community wants more work done on school choice for parents who want a faith-based education and potentially a battle over the availability of contraceptive access for women. Even on the first day of session, lawmakers took issue with there being a scheduled workday on Eid, marking the final day of the Muslim holiday Ramadan.
From my understanding, there was sort of some outreach middle of December about Eid. There's like prayers, people travel, see family, and we do have staff that could be impacted.
Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
Rick, as we are recording this podcast, Governor Brian Kemp is making his final headlining appearance at the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast held downtown. It is one of the premier political, legislative, networking events hosted every year by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. Typically happens on the third or fourth day of each legislative session. Tomorrow, January 15th, the outgoing Georgia governor will be making his final State of the State address as we head into a wide open 2026 election season. We have a number of open races: governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general. We're seeing a couple of challengers for insurance commissioner, as well as some other races. We are really kicking the electoral season in 2026 underway right now, with a lot more drama and action to come.
You're absolutely right. And if you're a political news junkie, as we are, this is really as good as it gets. We've started a new calendar year, and as you mentioned, there are so many big elections. We're talking statewide elections, local elections taking place here in Georgia, and of course, we all know the role of Georgia here now as a swing state. Everybody keeping an eye on, sort of trying to read the tea leaves and see what happens in Georgia and what that may portend for a presidential contest in 2+ years from now. So you're right, Governor Kemp, sort of his last hurrah, his swan song as he makes these final appearances at the Eggs and Issues breakfast this morning and his State of the State address tomorrow. He will stand in front of state leaders and legislators, I think, and have quite a bit of accomplishments to run through as he talks about his, what will be his 8 years in office running the state as the chief executive here in Georgia. He will most likely leave the state with a budget surplus, which is something that any fiscal conservative will be proud about. So we'll be hearing a lot about that as well. And it'll be very interesting to see how he weighs in on some of the legislative priorities in this new legislative session. He will absolutely want to have a say over these things, as it will help to shape his legacy in a lot of ways, to see exactly how some of that surplus money is spent by lawmakers. Governor Kemp is sure to put his thumb on the scale in terms of getting things going in the direction that he would like to see it.
Well, as a reminder, you can also watch and listen to Governor Kemp's final State of the State address. We will be streaming it on AtlantaNewsFirst.com and all of our streaming platforms, including on our Roku app and on our YouTube channel. And I was prepping a story that will house that stream tomorrow morning, looking back on Governor Kemp's 8 years as governor, looking back on some of the more notable achievements or milestones or what have you, depending on whether or not you're a Republican or a member of the loyal opposition. But I remember covering the gubernatorial race in 2018. It was a wide open race. Governor Nathan Deal had served his 2 terms. Brian Kemp, outgoing Secretary of State, running against Stacey Abrams, who was a Democrat, House Minority Leader, very effective lawmaker from DeKalb County. He won by a narrower than expected margin in 2018. That victory, that loss, regardless, it was a loss for Democrat Stacey Abrams, really propelled her for a brief period of time onto the national platform and the national stage. She gave the State of the Union rebuttal to President Donald Trump's State of the Union address in 2019. She would again seek the governorship 4 years later, going against an incumbent, Brian Kemp. Governor Kemp won by a larger margin the second time around than he did in 2018. Tell me if that really kind of solidified his stature in statewide and national politics.
I think it did. I think he certainly gained a lot of attention nationally, both with his re-election campaign, but also I think in some of the legislative priorities that he has championed in his time as governor, really solidifying his conservative credentials, but at the same time showing a little bit of a streak for what some might consider to be more moderate positions. I'm thinking most notably about his support for raises for teachers here in the state of Georgia. Not typically a position that you hear from Republican candidates, from conservative Republican candidates, but one that Governor Kemp got behind, and something that I think he can add to his list of accomplishments, and again something that I think helps to sort of frame him in a way that may make him a very palatable candidate on the national stage, should he decide to get into the Republican race for the White House as possibly someone to succeed President Trump when his term ends. So a very interesting candidate, somebody who I think would have broad national appeal. Of course, as we mentioned a minute ago, Georgia is very important to anyone who wants to win the presidency, and so having someone on the ticket from the state of Georgia could really be seen as a major plus for a political party. Now, of course, it all depends on which direction the Republican Party wants to go in. Does it want to continue along the MAGA route that President Trump has taken the party over the last many years, or does it want to go towards a more moderate, more traditional establishment type of direction for Republicans, something more along the lines of President Reagan, for example. And I think that that Governor Kemp, with his sort of homespun Southern twang, is someone who could very easily be very appealing to Republicans around the country as they begin to learn more about him.
Speaking of his Southern twang that you mentioned, it reminds me of another former governor, Zell Miller, who famously took the stage of the Republican National Convention where he endorsed the Republican candidate who was running against John Kerry. Tell me who was it George W. Bush, I believe.
Bush, yeah.
And
in 2004.
In 2004, but Zell Miller had that very familiar Georgia accent, as does Governor Brian Kemp, and so many of us, like myself, who were born and raised here in the state of Georgia. We're also looking at the qualifying, which ends today at 11:30 a.m., qualifying to replace or to run for the Northwest Georgia 14th Congressional District. Congressional race coming up in March and possibly April and May, and who knows, a couple more months on down the road for Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat. As you know, she resigned. Her seat officially became vacant January 5th. The next day, on the 6th, Governor Kemp set a special election date of March 10th with a runoff of April 8th. As of 9 o'clock this morning, when you and I are taping this podcast and streamed to be broadcast later today on Wednesday, the 14th, by my count, we have 18 candidates who have qualified, officially qualified, paid the $5,220 qualifying fee to become an official candidate to represent Georgia's 14th Congressional District. 2 Democrats, 1 Independent, 15 Republicans. Special election March 10th. Rick, what are the chances we're going to see a runoff on April 8th?
Very good. The chances are, I would put it at probably above 80%. It's almost easier to list the names of people who are not running for this seat for the Georgia 14th special election. There are so many candidates in the mix here. We have spoken to a number of them. We will continue to try to bring all of you interviews with all of these candidates who have declared between now and March, when the special election will take place. And of course, the way that elections here in the state run, that there has to be a 50+1% victory for someone. Otherwise, there will be a runoff. And so it does seem very, very unlikely with this many candidates having declared that any one of them is going to be able to get that 50+1%. So that all but guarantees another a runoff that would happen about a month or so after the special election takes place. And then, of course, all of this will be done all over again come November, when that seat whoever wins this special election will have to run again if he or she chooses to for a full 2-year term for the Georgia 14 congressional district. And so people up in northwest Georgia should put their running shoes on because they're going to be going back and forth to their polling place multiple times over the next several months as we figure out who's going to be the replacement for Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, one of the best known and most outspoken members of Congress over the last several years.
Speaking of the voters in the 14th Congressional District, the amazing people who populate not only that district but all of Georgia's other congressional districts and cities and towns and communities and hamlets, is it fair to say that the voters in the 14th District might not have as effective a representation as they deserve and as they are constitutionally entitled to, given the fact that so much of this year will be focused not only on campaigning, but immediately, almost after you win an election, you've got to go right back to hitting the campaign fundraising trail and doing everything that you can to build up a monetary war chest just so that you can run again in November. How fair is that system to our voters?
Well, fair or not, it is what it is. And so, I think that the people of Georgia 14 will make their voices heard in this special election.
We certainly hope that they will. Yeah.
And there will be a winner, whether it takes a runoff or not. Between now and that time, though, there is, you're right, a vacancy. There won't be a representative in Congress who is there as
at
the
least
voice,
until May.
as the voice of the people. That's right. So there is a bit of a gap. It causes problems not just for the people in Georgia 14, but for the Republican Party as a whole in Congress, because the Republican majority is so slim. So without a Republican in that seat, it makes it even more difficult for the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, to get the votes needed in order to get legislation passed. We've already seen a couple of examples where enough Republicans have sided with the Democrats in order to get a couple of pieces of legislation over the line, including, of course, most famously the vote on the Epstein files that took place at the end of last year. And of course, that was even before Marjorie Taylor Greene left office. She, in fact, was one of the leaders, one of the leading voices in the Republican Party in favor of that legislation that mandated the release of the files. All of which we should say have not yet been released as required by that law. But again, it just is the way things go when there is a vacancy, either because of resignation or because of the death of a lawmaker, as we saw recently in California, a Republican lawmaker, member of Congress passing away, and so voters in that district also having to fill that spot. So there are vacancies from time to time in Congress, and right now it's the people of Georgia 14 who are on the losing end of that as their seat remains empty until somebody wins that special election.
Now, you mentioned we have already interviewed a couple of candidates for the 14th Congressional District, and you can hear these interviews every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Atlanta News First. If you tune in and join Rick Volbaum and Doug Reardon for On the Record with Atlanta News First, airing every Sunday at 11 a.m. We are also putting all of our candidate interviews in their entirety, uncut and unedited, on our YouTube channel. Rick, you mentioned a couple of the candidates we've spoken with so far. Who have we interviewed and who's on tap?
Well, so personally, I can tell you I've interviewed Sean Harris, who is a Democrat whose name will be familiar because he was on the ballot the last time around, having lost to Marjorie Taylor Greene. He is making another go of it. He is a retired brigadier general, a military hero, and he is a cattle farmer right now up in the northwest part of our state. So he is running his campaign. I also spoke with Colton Moore, who is a now former state senator, who is also running for that seat as a Republican. We say former because he had to give up his seat in order to enter this election, enter this race. But as you said, there are a lot of other Republicans, another Democrat, as you said, who has now entered the race, an independent who has entered the race. We've got a couple of interviews coming up this weekend with 2 additional candidates. And I really want to encourage everybody to check out the unedited versions of these interviews. They're very, very interesting, because a lot of times when we film these interviews and we record them, we have to cut them down because of time constraints for a television program. Whereas we know that people are interested in hearing the candidates speak, in full, complete sentences and thoughts. And I really think that by posting the unedited versions of these interviews, you really get a sense of who these people are, what they're about, how they react and respond to questions from members of the media. And it really is a very good, I think, very representative of who these candidates are and the image that they want to project. So I would encourage people to watch our program On the Record, of course, for the edited versions, but also take the time, if you are a voter in Georgia 14, or if you're just interested in learning more about these particular candidates, and find the unedited versions of the interviews. I think that you'll find them very, very informative.
To paraphrase an old saying, an informed electorate is essential to the existence of a democratic republic, or something like that. I kind of like the way that sounded. But we are here at Atlanta News First. We'll continue to make every effort to inform you, our loyal viewers and listeners, of all the issues facing Georgia in 2026 and beyond. A reminder, watch Atlanta News First, watch On the Record with Atlanta News First every Sunday at 11 a.m. This has been your midweek podcast, and also you can download and listen to all of the On the Record podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, and watch all of our reports on the Atlanta News First YouTube channel.
Thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.